Hi everyone. This is the first part of representing and using data. So I've split this into two parts because it's quite a long section. This is all about how we actually view data, how we look at it. So there's lots of stuff here you'll have seen before, so tables of data and histograms, but there's also some new things which you might not have seen at GCSE, like box and whisker plots, which will probably be new. And there's some new bits of analysis we need to be able to do, as well as the mean and the median. There's a few other things we need to know about, and that's what we're going to go through in this lesson. Okay, so this is what we're going to cover. We're going to have a look at the median, the quartiles, and the interquartile range. I'm sure you'll already know what the median is. We'll go over that anyway. But the quartiles and the interquartile range will be a bit new. We'll have a look at box and whisker plots, which are a way of representing data. And we're going to do a few bits on tables of data, how we get the mean, how we get the median, and how we get those quartiles, which I talked about before. And we'll finish off with some stuff on histograms. Again, some of that you'll have seen before. There's some new little bits we need to be able to do. So this is kind of half revision from GCSE and half new things to have a look at. So let's have a think about the median, the quartiles, and the interquartile range. The median, I'm sure you'll know already, is the middle person. It's the middle part of that data. So let's have a look at this. You can see right in the middle there, 50% through our data is the median. I'm sure that's not new to you. At either ends, we've got the minimum and the maximum. Again, these are sort of self-explanatory, really. The minimum is the smallest piece of data, maximum is the largest piece of data, but we have got some new things here. First is the lower quartile. Now, quartile sounds a bit like quarter. It's 1/4 of the way through the data. So instead of the median that's exactly halfway through, the quartile is a quarter of the way, or 25% through the data. The lower quartile is 1/4 of the way through. The upper quartile is 3/4 of the way through, or 75% of the way through our data. So they're just additional metrics which we can use to say how spread out our data is and how our data looks. So here's an example data set just to give you an example. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 numbers there. That 15 is our middle number. I've written Q2 here, and we'll go on to this what this Q means in a second, but Q2 is the median. Okay, so we just sometimes call it Q2, and you'll see why in a second when I go through this notation. But it's nothing new, just Q2 is another name for the median. Q1 is the lower quartile, and Q3 is the upper quartile. So I'll just note those on. So Q1, that is the lower quartile, okay? So think of them as the quarters of the way through the data. So Q1 is the first quarter, that's the lower quartile. Q2 is the second quarter, that takes us to the middle. So this is the median. And Q3 is the upper quartile, which is 3/4 of the way through the data. And the last bit of the title says the interquartile range. Okay, and I've shortened that to IQR here. It's quite a common abbreviation for interquartile range. Now the interquartile range is how far it is from Q3 to Q1. So it's this distance here on our data. So from the first quarter to the third quarter. Okay, so interquartile range Q3 minus Q1. Very simple definition. So in our data, we've got 25 as Q3, 12 as Q1, subtract those from each other, and we've got 30, and that is our interquartile range. Okay, so basic overview of this this little bit is we've got the upper quartile and the lower quartile. They're the quarters of our data. Lower quartile is 1/4 of the way through, upper quartile is 3/4 of the way through, and the interquartile range is the distance between those two quartiles. So it's the upper quartile minus the lower quartile. Okay, let's have a look at box and whisker plots. Maybe something you haven't heard about before, but it links in with the quartiles that we've just been talking about. This is basically what they look like. So they're called box and whisker plots because you've got this big box in the middle and the whiskers, which are these lines on the outside. Now, this is what it all means. That line in the middle of the box, that's Q2. Remember, that's just the median. The edges of the box, so the left edge of the box, that is the lower quartile. It represents the lower quartile of our data. The rightmost edge of the box is the upper quartile of the data, and the whiskers off the end are the minimum and the maximum data points. So that whisker represents the minimum piece of data. This whisker represents the maximum piece of data. So again, it's just a way of viewing the data and having a look at what it looks like, where the median is, if it's really spread out, if it's all really close together. It gives us a way of visualizing it. So back to that data set I used before. So we found out that Q1 was 12, Q2, or the median, was 15, and Q3 was 25. And obviously the minimum is 4. So that's obviously our minimum there. And the maximum is 29. So we can represent all of that on a box plot. And it looks something like this. Okay, so the whiskers show the minimum and the maximum. So I've written in 4 there for the minimum, 29 for the maximum. The median is that middle line, so it's 15, and the quartiles are 12 and 25. So we can see from this kind of a few interesting bits and pieces about our data. For instance, we can see the minimum is quite far below the box, isn't it, compared to the maximum? So the maximum is only slightly off the end of the box, so it means there's probably not very much data up there, where there's quite a long line down here. It means the minimum is quite spread out. That side of the data is quite spread out. But the median isn't in the middle of the box. It's kind of off to the left somewhere. So we can see the median is quite near to Q1, which is this 12 here. So because the median and the Q1 are quite close together, there's probably quite a lot of data at the start of this box. And we can see there is, because look, there's 12, 12, 13, 15. There's quite a lot in that section. And it's very close together, which is why this line has ended up closer to the bottom of the box. So we can figure out a few things like that by drawing box plots. It makes it a bit easier to visualize what's going on.